Hey everyone, I'm Rather Incoherent, and I want to talk today about cards that I think are actually really good cards, but that I have never put in a deck, and I will probably never put in a deck. There are 4 cards that are on my mind, and the first one is one that is probably one a lot of people agree with, and he's a really good example of what I'm talking about. Dr. Maleson is a Seeker ally. He's 1 cost, 2/2 soak, which is already just an amazing ratio of cost to soak. But he's got the reaction ability to, when you draw an encounter card from the encounter deck, exhaust Maleson and place one of your clues on your location to draw a different one after shuffling it back in. That's really good. That's like actually crazy. But then you look at all the other Seeker allies and you realize, like, wait a second. Dr. Milan, Jeremiah Kirby, Research Librarian, Laboratory Assistant. Those are just the big 4 off the top of my head, and that's not even counting your off colors. William T. Maleson just doesn't make it into decks. It's not because he's bad. It's because his competition is just insane. If you put this card in Rogue, I would run this in every Rogue deck at level 0 just for the soak. Hell, if it had 1/1 soak and that ability, I might still run it, even though Rogues are way worse at getting the clues. And the reason that I'm not running this card is the main reason that all of these cards are on this list. Because, after all, a great card that you're not going to play is sort of a contradiction. But there's always an opportunity cost, something else you could be doing instead. And that's why these 4 cards are cards that I would like to play. I think they're good, but I can't imagine I ever will. Halllow is unfortunately an example of this type of card. Before I didn't put Halllow in my deck, I planned to. I played Sister Mary, I built out the core of my deck, and eventually at like 30 experiences, like, all right, cool, it's time to buy Halllow. And I just looked at my deck for a while and then sighed and took it out and upgraded my stand-togethers instead. Because Halllow doesn't actually do anything. In fact, it's a lot worse than doing nothing unless the Doom mattered. See, that's the problem. The Doom usually doesn't matter in most scenarios. In most scenarios, you either won or lost before the Doom finishes anyway. In the scenarios where the Doom clock is the problem, though, first you have to be able to trigger the Halllow. You have to have 10 Bless tokens in the bag for each Halllow you play. Then you get rid of them, being a Bless deck this probably really sucks for you. And then you remove 1 Doom from play. Unless you were exactly 1 turn from some meaningful amount of victory or winning the scenario, that still did nothing. In fact, it was worse than nothing. It took away your Bless tokens and a card and 3 resources and experience. And the same thing with the second Halllow. If you can trigger them both, then alright, cool. Were you losing by exactly 2 turns of Doom? Because it only affects the Doom in that narrow window where you're losing because of Doom by 1 or 2 turns. Halllow really doesn't affect most things. And generally speaking, since you invested so much in generating these Bless tokens and playing the Halllow, if you had built your deck and played differently, you might have made up the difference that 1 or 2 Doom was costing you. Halllow is a card that I was like insane about. I thought it was so obviously crazy. 3 resources, a card, and 10 Bless tokens to give my whole team an extra round? Sign me up. But in reality, it's a much worse card than a Watchful Piece, because a Watchful Piece is dealing with the Mythos deck, the part that's actually scary and a problem in making you worry about the Doom. Because you might not have time to deal with everything the Mythos deck is throwing at you. The Doom, though, on its own just isn't a problem. And you're better off spending your resources and cards and experiences somewhere else to deal with the things that are usually the reason you're actually losing. Forbidden Tome is, I think, the most questionable card on this list, because a testless clue is a thing that's really worth building for on higher difficulties. But I play at standard difficulty because I feel it opens up more possibilities for playing weirder, jankier characters. I don't like feeling punished for playing characters that are already weaker, and I feel that if I played at higher difficulties, I would feel that immensely. On standard, I want to go experiment with skids. But if I played on expert, I would hate the idea of lowering the difficulty to play skids. And I would also hate the idea of playing skids on expert. So since I play at standard and I'm judging it through that lens, 1 action for 1 movement and a testless clue is good. It is really good. I'm not pretending for a second it isn't. And if you can combo this with Abigail Foreman, then 1 action to do that twice is insane. So what's the problem? Well, Farsight exists. Farsight costs the same experience, only 1 more resource, takes up a much less contested slot, and it triggers at 8 cards instead of 12, and 12 is way harder to hit than 8. Farsight's going to give you a free action, or a fast action rather, to play an insight event each turn. Those insight events often include things that look for clues, burning the midnight oil, seeking answers. They can include cards that draw towards the next thing that gets clues, or gives you resources to pay for these clue finding events. In my eyes, Farsight is an easier payoff to capitalize on in most decks, and simultaneously, it's probably giving you the same or better results as a Forbidden Tome if you have enough events in your deck that synergize with the Farsight. The Forbidden Tome, to me, just requires a level of work to get it online that is so much more than what Farsight is asking you to do for a very similar payoff. So I just don't see the reason to it. Why would I bother identifying this and making sure I always have 12 cards in my hand and giving up my hand slots when I could just pay one more resource, give up my irrelevant arcane slot, and get a very, very similar effect? And again, all of this falls apart on higher difficulties. When I'm testing like 7 Book against 3 Shroud on normal difficulty, that's pretty much guaranteed. If I'm doing that on Expert, man, that seems a lot worse than Forbidden Tome. So Forbidden Tome really is suffering from being on a lower difficulty, where what it is offering me isn't something that I have any reason to care about. This is a card that I didn't want to put on this list. It's also the card that made me make this list. Garotte Wire is incredible. It's a 2-cost asset that takes up your accessory slot for most characters relatively uncontested. As a lightning bolt, you get to exhaust it and fight at +2. It's only usable on an enemy with exactly 1 health, but this is basically a beat cop you wear around your neck on standard difficulty. It's not testless, but I mean, a fighter should be able to pretty reliably hit people with +2, because like your weapon probably isn't giving you more than that, and you're built to reliably use your weapon. So with this insane action compression, why on earth do I think Garotte Wire isn't worth running? Well, like I said, it's usually an uncontested slot, but in Rogue, which is the color that Garotte Wire is in, you are already competing against Lucky Cigarette Case. Turns out, drawing a card every turn is really good. But the bigger deal is that this is clearly something only a dedicated fighter is buying. You're not buying your Garotte Wire on your flex character, that's Lucky Cigarette Case every time. Tony is the only dedicated fighter Rogue has. In terms of the off-color characters that have access to Garotte Wire, it's just Leo. And Tony and Leo do legitimately consider running Garotte Wire. If you told me you used it in either of their decks, I would not be disappointed in you all. I'd be like, yeah, that sounds fucking sick. But I can't imagine using it myself. It just seems suboptimal in every way. It's because that both of those characters have access to really good melee weapons. Switchblade level 2 on Tony, and Cyclopean Hammer on Leo. As well as Switchblade, I guess. Those characters have access to Haste and Leo DeLuca. I don't need a fast action to deal 1. I can just take 5 actions in my turn and hit you with my normal weapon. I'm never going to need the Garotte Wire, it's just overkill. Especially in Tony, who just has an extra free action because of he's Tony. He's a wanted criminal, so I get a free action. Like, the big problem Garotte Wire suffers from isn't that it's not incredible, it's that the only 2 characters in the game that could ever want it, they do want it. But there's just other stuff they want more that does the same thing and ultimately makes Garotte Wire kind of redundant. It's never bad, it's never irrelevant. It might give you an action that you can use to draw a card or something, which is what Lucky Cigarette Case was doing. And Lucky Cigarette Case didn't cost you 2 experience, and that's where it really falls apart for me. When I give up the Lucky Cigarette Case for this and characters that really didn't need it, and it's costing me experience at the same time, like, if you give me a 100 experience Tony deck, I will buy a Relic Hunter for a Garotte Wire. But in a real life situation where I'm sitting down trying to upgrade my Tony deck, I never find the time to fit in the Garotte Wire. I never replace the Lucky Cigarette Case. I never get Relic Hunter. It's always something else that's more important. Same thing is happening with Leo. So yeah, Garotte Wire is an awesome card. There are so many characters in the game that want it, but it's only available to the 2 that really don't need it. I will say, if you're using a gun build for either of those characters, Garotte Wire is incredible. But I just don't see why I'd build guns on those characters when they have access to such disgusting melee weapons. And that's really the issue. Garotte Wire is just barely, on every front, not worth running in my mind. Which is in no way a point against Garotte Wire. It's probably one of the better cards in the game. Like, if I made individual card tier list, I can't imagine ranking it lower than A+. Just like I can't imagine putting it in my deck. I probably will someday, though. Unlike the other cards on this list, where I would never play Forbidden Tome unless I was playing on higher difficulty. I would never play William T. Maleson unless it was an off-color card being used for soak. And I just wouldn't play Halllow, period. End of story. I could actually see myself running Garotte Wire because I think it's fun. And then it would just be good. I wouldn't even feel bad about having it in my deck. But as long as I'm like try-harding and really thinking super hard about optimizing characters, Garotte Wire is not getting a slot. And that's a damn shame, because I love the card. Anyway, that's it for me. This has been a sort of random shortlist video I threw together because I missed the upload today. My analytical commentary tends to do better anyway, so I imagine that you guys will consider this an acceptable apology for missing a day. That's it for now, though. I've been rather incoherent. If you like this sort of content, then subscribe for more of it, and I'll see you in the next one.